Hi, I'm Joshua Farnsworth. Welcome to my traditional woodworking school. In the last video, I shared a tutorial on cutting a curved mortise and tenon joint with my friend Bill Anderson. And it was on a traditional Howarth bow saw. And in this video, I'm gonna show you a clip from Bill assembling this bow saw, show you how everything fits together. It's really interesting. So hope you enjoy it, and thanks for watching.
Finally, to that point now where we can assemble our saw. There'll still be some scraping and sanding action to be done later on, but let's go ahead and assemble the saw, string it up, and talk about some of the important aspects of setting up a saw and using it and taking care of it. So I'm going to go ahead and insert the handles in here. One of the things that's going to happen when we do the scraping and sanding later on, we're going to lose all these reference marks that we have right here, right now. So I've gone ahead and inside the joinery, I have labeled the mortise and tenon so I know that they'll be able to go back together again. And that part I won't be sanding away. That'll be staying there. And on this side I have it labeled 2, for example. And one other thing here is that to make sure I always put the long handle back on the long, on the right arm, I've just labeled L for long. And that way I know that this is going back in a certain way. So let's just go ahead and assemble this together. Here's the bow saw web, and I'm going to assemble this with the handles, with the teeth pointing towards the handle. So I want this saw to cut on the pull stroke. Now, there's probably the woodworking world, the bow saw world, might be divided into 2 groups of people. The pull stroke people and the push stroke people. I think setting it to cut on the pull stroke makes a whole lot of sense because it's a narrow blade. There may be times when having it on a push stroke would make more sense. But in general, I always mount my bow saws to cut on the on the pull stroke. So I've dropped some pins here. These pins actually are what are called escutcheon pins that you buy from any hardware store for small brass hardware and whatnot. They usually come in little plastic boxes. So you want something that's 18 gauge or smaller. In other words, a pretty narrow diameter pin in order to be able to drop into those holes. And then eventually, when we get things set up right, we'll bend these pins over. We'll cut off the points and bend the pins over just a little bit so they won't drop out naturally. Now we're going to go ahead and assemble the windlass here. I've used a variety of strings. I think originally the material may have been waxed jute, and you can still find jute in the hardware stores, quite common. Cotton string will work well. If you're unsure about the strength of your string, just put some extra loops in here. But for the most part, I put 4 complete loops. So I've tied a loop on one end here, and that's to start this process. So here's my first loop, and I'll just go ahead and I'll set this aside for right now. And that's 1 complete turn there. I'll do 4 of these. That's 2. There's 3 right there. That's the 4th complete turn. I want to keep these strings separate so I don't. And then the last turn, I have a partial turn here, which I will cut that off a little bit. And I'll weave that loose end into the work here. So like so. And this last one, I'll just, let me get a knife here. I can cut this off. I've got it a little bit long here. So I need about a half a turn here. And I'll just take this loose end and weave it back and forth in a random sort of a way on one set of the bundles of fibers. Just back and forth across all four of them, sometimes split them into groups and back and forth. Just weave it in there. Really all you're really doing here is increasing the amount of surface area or friction that the fibers have so they won't pull loose. In other words, you don't necessarily tie it off. If you tie it off, then if you need to take the saw apart, you've got to cut it loose. So there we've got that woven in, and now we'll begin to tighten the windlass. And as I do this, I will focus on having the windlass opposite my mortise in the stretcher here. So I can shift this down back and forth till I see that it's centered here, and continue to do that, get that nice and tight. And I've never actually had a saw break on me when I first strung it up. It doesn't mean that I'm not always nervous about it though, because I am. So now we've got the saw assembled. You can put this whirl right in the right spot here. You can see that there's some slight tension here. It's going to hold the joint together. At this point here, you listen to the saw blade, pluck the blade. It sounds like a dull thunk. So we need to tighten this up just a little bit more. I'll go ahead and take the you can sort of, maybe if you can hear that sound, it's a little bit higher pitched, a little more sharp. So we're getting there. Now, it could be when you do this initially, the string is going to stretch and you're going to have to sort of condition the string, so to speak. That's starting to sound pretty good. Nice vibration there. Nice sound. So we're ready to rock and roll with this saw. This is the handle that I hold with. This is the handle I guide with. So I often will hold the saw in this manner when I'm sawing. I'm just pinching this handle. I'm not actually directing or pushing down or pulling with this hand. Just directing to keep my cut straight across the board as I'm sawing like that. And all the action here is on this side, pulling back with the saw like so. And keeping me square this way and horizontal. So that's really what this hand is doing here. The other thing to think about is if you need to adjust the angle, you can turn these and then sort of overturn them and then twist them in to lock them down at the new angle. If you're cutting something along board and you're ripping down straight down, you can turn the frame away from the interference with the board and just saw straight down. So that's the technique for that. So cutting on a pull stroke, locking the handle in tight there so we get a wedging action to make sure it doesn't slip on you. Over time this string is going to probably stretch a little bit, so might even break. So we might wind up putting a couple extra turns with the cotton string. The jute, I think, might be a little bit stronger choice there. So when you get done with the saw, we don't leave the saw tightened up like this. Too much strain on this part right here and right here. It's as Roy Underhill would say, you got to loosen her up before you put her to bed. So we need to take off the tension here, maybe a half a turn. Not so much that things fall apart down here, but not enough tension that there's any strain on anything here other than just holding it together. Other than that, I think we've covered the basic idea about assembling this and how to use it and how to store it. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about finishing and surfacing out the final appearance on this.
If you're interested in learning traditional woodworking, come take a class at our school in Earlysville, Virginia. You can also visit our website at woodandshop.com, where you'll find a bunch of free woodworking lessons, workshop tours, and our very popular tool buying guides. And make sure you subscribe to our free newsletter to get our latest articles and videos. Enjoy!